I was kidnapped and forced to work for a wealthy man in Thailand. This is my story. 7 years ago, I decided to take a solo trip across Asia. It had always been a dream of mine to explore different countries on my own, meet new people, and experience different cultures. Bangkok was one of the final destinations on my journey, and at the time, I never imagined that visiting the city would completely change my life. One evening, while walking through a busy street market filled with tourists and locals, I met an attractive European man. He approached me casually and started a conversation. He seemed friendly, educated, and respectful. We talked for nearly an hour while browsing the market stalls. He told me he was also from the United States and was traveling around Asia before returning home. Eventually, he asked if I would like to have dinner with him. Normally, I would have been cautious, but he seemed genuine. Everything about him felt trustworthy. So I agreed. That night, he took me to one of the nicest restaurants I had seen during my trip. We laughed, shared stories, and talked about our lives. After dinner, he suggested we visit a popular nightclub nearby. The night felt perfect. Hours later, as we were heading back, he called a taxi. During the ride, he handed me a bottle of water. I remember taking a few drinks. After that, everything became blurry. My vision started fading. I felt dizzy and struggled to keep my eyes open. Then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on a cold floor inside a dark room. There were no windows, no furniture, and no indication of where I was. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting weak shadows across the room. I immediately began screaming for help. I pounded on the walls and kicked the door, but nobody answered. Eventually, the door opened. A tall, thin man entered carrying a tray of food and a bottle of water. He wasn't the man I had met at the market. I desperately asked him where I was and what had happened. He didn't say a word. He placed the food on the floor and walked out. The door locked behind him. Hours later, several other men entered. They stood around me, speaking in a language I didn't understand. One by one, they inspected me carefully. They checked my eyes, looked at my teeth, and examined me from head to toe. I was terrified. When they finally left, I curled up in the corner of the room and cried. The next few days were even worse. No one explained anything. Food arrived occasionally, but conversation never came. Without windows, I couldn't tell whether it was morning or night. I lost all sense of time. Sometimes I would sleep for what felt like hours and wake up convinced only minutes had passed. The isolation began affecting my mind. I started hearing noises that weren't there. Sometimes I thought I heard my family calling my name. Other times I imagined footsteps outside the room even though nobody was there. I blamed myself constantly. Why had I trusted that man? Why had I gotten into that taxi? Why hadn't I been more careful? Weeks passed. Then one day, the thin man entered carrying only a glass of water. I drank it. A few hours later, I felt extremely tired. I couldn't stay awake. Everything faded again. When I woke up, I was no longer in the basement. Instead, I was lying in a large, luxurious bed surrounded by expensive furniture. The room looked like something from a movie. Paintings decorated the walls. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. A fireplace burned quietly in the corner, and sitting nearby was an older man watching me. I jumped out of bed and rushed toward the door. Locked. I searched for another exit. Nothing. The man remained calm. Eventually, he stood and approached me. In broken English, he explained that I was now living in his mansion. According to him, he had paid a large amount of money to bring me there. He said I would work as a maid in his household. I thought he was insane. I demanded to be released immediately. Instead, he calmly explained the rules. I would receive my own room. I would eat well. I would help clean and maintain the mansion. And if I cooperated, life would be comfortable. I had no choice. The mansion was heavily guarded. Escaping seemed impossible. Soon, I met the other women living there. There were 5 of them. To my surprise, they all appeared happy. They smiled constantly and spoke positively about the owner. Some even described him as generous. I couldn't understand it. Were they pretending? Had they accepted their situation? Or had they simply been there so long that they no longer remembered another life? Months passed. I learned the routines of the mansion. Every day followed the same schedule: cleaning, cooking, serving meals, maintaining rooms. The owner watched everything closely. Over time, he began trusting me more than the others. He often requested that I handle personal tasks for him. I washed his clothes, served his dinners, organized his office. Sometimes he would spend hours talking about books, business, and politics. The more trust he placed in me, the more freedom I received. Eventually, he allowed me to clean his private study. No other maid was permitted inside. That room changed everything. One evening, while dusting shelves, I discovered a mobile phone hidden inside a desk drawer. At first, I ignored it. I worried it might be some kind of trap. For several days, I checked the drawer. The phone remained there. Finally, on the 5th day, I decided to take the risk. My hands shook as I turned it on. To my surprise, there was no passcode. The signal was weak, barely 1 bar. I moved around the room searching for a stronger connection. Nothing. Finally, I climbed onto the desk and found one spot where the signal remained steady. Quickly, I dialed a number. The phone rang. Every second felt like an hour. Then someone answered. I nearly cried. I explained everything. The kidnapping, the basement, the mansion, the owner, the years that had passed. The person on the other end listened carefully and promised to contact the appropriate authorities. Before hanging up, I begged them to find me. Then I quickly returned the phone to the drawer. Moments later, footsteps approached the door. The owner entered. He smiled at me. My heart nearly stopped. Did he know? Had he discovered what I had done? For weeks afterward, I lived in constant fear. Every time he looked at me, I wondered if he had figured it out. Yet nothing happened. Life continued normally. Then one morning, everything changed. Sirens echoed through the property. Vehicles filled the driveway. Officials entered the mansion accompanied by security personnel and representatives connected to the U.S. Embassy. The owner immediately began arguing with them. He insisted that nobody was being held against their will. He claimed everyone worked for him voluntarily. As he argued, one of the officials quietly approached me. He told me it was time to leave. I could barely believe it. After years of captivity, rescue had finally arrived. As I walked out of the mansion, I looked back one last time. The owner stared at me. The expression on his face was something I will never forget. Shock, anger, betrayal. Within hours, I was on a plane heading back to the United States. For the first time in years, I felt free. When I landed, I was reunited with my family. The recovery process was long and difficult. There were nightmares. There were panic attacks. There were moments when I questioned whether everything had truly happened. But little by little, life became normal again. Today, I rarely talk publicly about what happened. Most people don't know my story, but every morning when I wake up in my own bed, surrounded by the people I love, I remember something important. Freedom is a gift that many people never fully appreciate until it is taken away.